Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Hari has come and helped out a number of events for me, presenting about Blend. You work in the product group for Blend, right? And so he's going to talk tonight about Blend. He's going to fill up most of the time talking about Blend as it applies to your XAML and C# development. And then I'm going to come up for just a little bit afterwards and talk about how all of the Blend goodness applies if you're doing HTML and JavaScript development. Okay? So please welcome Hari Menon.
So, it's great being here. So I work in the XAML design tools team. We pretty much own all XAML tooling across every platform, like WPF, Silverlight, Windows Phone, and Windows Store. So one big thing that we did for the last release was, I don't know how many people have used XAML Designer and Dev10. Anybody used it? So Dev10 Designer was completely different code base. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I should turn that on. So the Dev10 Code Designer was completely different from the Blend one. So we had two different code bases lying on Microsoft. So what we did for the last release, we took the Blend Designer and moved that into VS as well. So you have the exact same experience in both products. A common question then people ask is, then why do you have two different products, right? If it's the same designer. The reason is we wanted Blend to be a place where people do design-focused tasks. In VS, you have a lot of windows flying around. In Blend, you only have those things that you need to accomplish your design tasks. Everything else is actually hidden away. You don't have to worry about it. And VS, we want to be a place where people can do complex operations like actually writing code or actually doing refactoring. And we wanted to actually make these products different in that way. Going forwards, we'll invest more of our time in doing design tooling in Blend and doing probably more stuff like advanced IntelliSense or better refactoring features for VS. So is everybody here a XAML developer, or are there any HTML folks here? HTML, right? So I know Jeremy is going to talk about HTML and JavaScript a bit, but I thought I should make my case for XAML as well. So why would you want to use XAML? If you've been a .NET developer for the past, let's say, 7 years, you probably touched WPF, Silverlight, and Windows Phone. It's very easy to port your skills over. It's the exact same XAML. Almost all the constructs are the same. There are some slight differences, but not that many that you would find it difficult to move on. For developers new to XAML, XAML is basically in describing objects in a declarative model. So it's very powerful. You can pretty much write your entire UI in XAML. There are certain patterns like MVVM that allow you to make sure that your application UI and your data model or your logic is actually very separate. For Windows Store, there are a lot of free third-party libraries out there that help you get started on this. So you can ground up build your application in a very, well-architected fashion, actually. Then the XAML platform team ships a lot of controls out of the box. There are some that you probably won't find that you'll find in JavaScript at this point, things like menu flyout, app bar buttons. But some of these controls are available from third-party custom control providers like Telerik or Rad Controls, or even there are open source libraries like Callisto that is available that you can download using the NuGet Manager in Visual Studio itself that provides these kind of controls for you. Then if you want to write your custom control, it's very easy. It's as simple as deriving from a type, and then you can write your custom behavior, and you have a new control that you can share with other people, or you can use in an application. So I'm going to skip this slide. We already talked about this. I'm just going to tell you what do we offer in VS and what do we offer in Blend. In VS, you can basically do things like control creation, layout, property editing, basic data. But in Blend, you have more advanced functionalities for XAML, like you can actually edit path vectors. You can declare vector images in XAML as paths, and you can actually edit that in Blend. You can do styling. You can edit templates, edit control styles, edit data templates. You can do data binding. You can even edit states in a visual manner. You don't have to actually change a state value, F5, and see how it's going to look like in input. You can actually do that within Blend itself, and I'll show you how. Then you can set transitions, and we even offer you ways to import Illustrator and Photoshop files. So you can import your assets using Blend and actually incorporate that into your Windows 8 app. So how do we help you get started? a lot of time for the last release we spent on actually creating a whole bunch of templates, like the grid app, the split app, a lot of item templates like contract that really helps you get started pretty fast. These templates in Visual Studio, if you say new project, you go to Windows Store, you'll see a grid app, right? That thing is almost a completely functional Windows Store app. It basically has navigation built into it. It responds to layout changes. Like if you snap your app to Snap, it'll actually make the correct transition on the UI. And all that plumbing is built in for you. Even things like integration with Suspicion Manager is also a part of the template. So it's up to individuals. I've seen certain people actually build their entire app starting from grid. Other people actually they create a blank application and just selectively import assets from the grid app and use it. So it's up to you. But there's a whole lot of functionality in the templates, and you should definitely take a look at it if you're going to start a new app. It's the same thing for JavaScript as well. They have the exact same templates and a couple of more in the JavaScript world. We also have item templates for contracts, like every Windows app should theoretically, if it makes sense, to support share and search contracts. So we have item templates that you basically say, hey, add this new contract. We insert code and everything for you such that it just works out of the box. So I should give that a try. We'll go through that in a couple of minutes. OK, so around 7 months back, my manager wanted me to actually go ahead and build what he hoped was a good-looking app. So I was like, OK, fine, I'll build something that with movies. And I really wanted to use some kind of REST API. So I choose flixster. So what you see on the right is basically just a grid with a couple of fancy images in the background and a grid view that is bound to some data source, which is actually live data. One more thing in the Blend Designer is that the Blend Designer is almost a full running Windows Store app. We pretty much execute every piece of code in your project. And that helps us actually give you a very specific experience. What you see on the UI in Blend is almost always what you'll see when you actually FI an app, provided you have the correct data model and everything hooked up. So what you see here is I'm actually talking to a live Flixster service, and that data is on the designer itself. There's not F5 from the app. There's actually F5. I just took a screenshot from Blend itself. Now, so this is basically what we'll walk through in the demo is I'll take an app from the start, and we try building something that is similar using Blend itself. And probably not, I don't have to write any hand code, any XAML. So let's do that. Before that, let me just show you the template that I'm talking about and what you need to know about it. So I'm just going to do a new project, select Windows Store. By the way, this is all publicly available bits. There's nothing new or fancy. It is just development RTM, so sorry, Visual Studio 2012 with update 2. So I'm just going to hit OK. So I'm just going to open a grouped items page. So you have this exact same design in Blend as well. You can create projects in Blend as well. If you look at the common folder, there are a whole bunch of things here that's very useful. For example, the layout aware page. Every page in this particular template derives from this particular type. And this actually has things like it responds to your keyboard input. So it's a very good reference point for you to figure out how do you want to respond to keyboard input, how do you want to respond to touch input, how do you like your suspension manager to work. Everything is actually enabled in this particular template. So you can just take a look at it whenever you're building your app and probably copy over stuff into your app, and it'll just work. It's very well tested as well, so it's a good starting point for you. And if I click the project, one sec. And I go to Windows Store, you can basically see we have contracts like file open, search contract, and share contract. When you add these contracts, we inject code into your solution so that the correct hookups with the Windows WinRT is actually set up. So when you FI the app, bring up the charms bar, and hit share contract, the page will automatically get hooked into it. So all that is done for you behind the covers, and that's pretty awesome. So that's it for the templates. Please feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions if you have anything around these topics. So let me start it off. So I've just opened this application here. I'm just going to show you the XAML for a bit. As you can see, all it does is I have a collection view source that's bound to a groups in my data model. The data model I've actually declared as a static resource. this collection view, the reason why we use collection view source is basically to support grouping, because I want to group by like the rating or the audience rating or the critics rating. So I have to provide a group data source, and CVS converts a group data source into something that the grid view control and the list view control recognizes, and then shows data in a group by format. So I have a data template. Let's not look at that. I'll create a data template from scratch there. And all my application has this time is a path, which basically defines this guy over here, which I have imported from Illustrator. So the grid view is now, this item source property is set to the grouped items view source that we saw above. So first, I want to basically create a simple tile that shows the image of the movie and the name of the movie. So what I can do for that is right-click on the grid view control, go to Edit Additional Templates, Edit Item Template, and say Create Empty. So this box lets me choose where to put the data template. So a common thing, if you're going to use the data template only in one place, you might as well as put in the same document. The reason being, Blend has much better support for resources in the same document. You can edit these resources within the scope of this page itself. Let's say if I put that in application, when you do edit template again, we'll have to take you to app.xaml to edit it. So we can't edit in place. So if you put in this application, Blend can allow you to edit this thing in place. So I'm just going to hit OK. You can see a new data template is created. A grid was here. A grid was created as well by default. I'm going to select the grid, and you can see that there's nothing there, right? So I'm going to set a height, a width to, let's say, 200, the height to 250. You can see that rendering in the design surface itself. And because this is a grid, we support a whole lot of design time for grid. I can basically click here and create a row instantly. So I have a row here. You can see the row definition, everything was set right.
What were you doing at that point? Were you just simply hovering your mouse?
Just hover my mouse over. So that specifically is for grid. Then I'm going to go to the assets panel. I'm going to search for a text. Oh, that's text block, right? Yeah. I'm going to drag drop that in this area. So you can see every single item now has a text block to it. And I'm going to just do a reset layout so the extra margin, everything is removed, and it fits completely into this particular area defined by the grid. Now I'm going to do a data binding. I'm going to select this text property over here and hit Create Data Binding. OK, that actually I have on a different screen. So,
what does the star mean?
Which one?
So actually, in the XAML,
yeah,
you had the height equal to 211 star. What
yeah. So this is so when you go 211, it's absolute pixels. Yeah. 211 star basically sizes. How do I explain it? For example, star means equal,
yep,
right? So 211 basically means if you have, let's say, you have 100 pixels available, 200 star will translate to the current relative layout. So
it's basically, it will divide the space in that ratio?
Exactly.
Okay.
Relative to the sizes thing. It's not exact pixels, though. It'll translate itself. So I have that here. I'm just going to click on Text, Create Data Binding. And you can see that Blend now actually flows the data context over. So right now, we know what properties are available in data context for it to bind to. So I can just go ahead and select Display Title and click OK. So you can see that now that you can see the name of the movies here, right? The next what I would like to do is I'm going to search for image control. Drag it up the top one over here. Right-click, reset layout. It fits in. I'm now going to bind the source property to a property in my data model. I'm going to click Source, Create Data Binding, and select Profile. So that's easy. It's that easy to actually design a data template in Blend. All you got to do is create a data template. You start binding to your properties in data model, and instantly lights up. And it's actually live data from the service itself. I don't have any sample data or anything. It's actually running pure user code at this point. So we basically have some form, something that we want. So I'm going to make it a little bit more prettier. I'm going to select the text block, and I can do operations like group into a border. I'm going to select the border, go over to the property inspector, and just select something like black. I can select the image over here and change this property so that it's uniform to fill. So it kind of fills up the space, that space that's available. And I have something similar to my actual finished running app. Now I'm going to scope up. So right now I'm the data template editing scope. So I need to scope up to come back to the actual tree, the visual tree of the current document. I'm going to come up. You can see it refreshes. You can see everything here. What I'm going to do next is basically add groups to this grid view. I can do that by right-clicking on the grid view again and execute the add group style command. So now, basically, a new group style was added to this grid view. The whole XAML, everything's inserted for you. You have nothing to worry about. But I need to style it now. So what I can do for that is right-click on the grid view again, go to Edit Group Style, Edit Header Template, and hit Edit Current. So you can see there's a small space over there. I'm going to select the text block, go to the text property, hit Data Binding, and you can see that even we flowed on the correct schema to an item in the group. So I'm going to select Title and hit OK. So its title is pretty tiny at this point. I want to set to a style. So by the way, all the templates come with a file called standard styles.xaml. It's basically Windows approved styles for like what should the size of your page header be, what should the size of your subtitle be. So all that is prepackaged with the templates itself. So I've added that particular file to my solution as well. So I'm just going to set edit style, apply resource, and I'm going to set it as subheader text style. And the style is instantly applied. I can select the text block again. Just say group into a border. Set a slightly different color. And that's it. Then I'm going to scope up. I want to really change the whole layout of my group. If you look at my final application, it basically has the group header on the left side and the items on the right. But this is like top down. I want to change that layout completely. I can do that by going up, right-clicking the grid view again, going to Edit Group Style, Edit Container Style, Edit Item Container Style, and hit Edit Current. So you can see a whole box has been drawn around the whole in the group. I can select the grid. So this content presenter is where the header is actually, the header of the group is actually placed at. The items control is used to display the items in that particular group. Right now there is just one. So I'm going to select the content presenter, the grid, and I'm going to delete the rows off. I don't really need rows, I need columns. So I can just delete the rows. Then I'm just going to add a column over here. Select the content presenter, go to properties, and set the column index to 0 and the column span to 1. I'll select the image, that is items control over here, set the column to 1, and the column span to 1 as well. So you can see that basically it moved out of the way, right? But it is kind of big though. That is surprising. Oh, yeah, I should set a size for it. So you can see that now it's two different things. I can set the items control, set a margin to it, so it stays a bit away from the title. I can use a property inspector for pretty much everything. Set up like 40 pixels. I'm going to scope up for a moment. Edit grid view, edit group style, header template. Select the border and set a height and width to it. So that looks a bit better. Still not really good. We'll just go back into editing the container style again. Let me just see, why is it so far away? One moment. Yeah, that's not really behaving well right this time. It should actually go up. But so basically, if you make a little more edits, you can actually move the header template to top and keep the group item on the left side itself. So if I just F5 this application right now, I'm just going to move that over, function, Windows function, page up. So there's one problem in the default template. I really don't like this whole blue border over here. Like, how would you change that? This only happens when there is like, when you actually select that element. So I can use Blend to edit any state. A state in a control in XAML is basically what we call visual states. It is control using something called Visual State Manager. Think about a visual state as a user input. So there could be things like check state or selected state, selecting state, dragging state. So in XAML, what you can do is you can specify in these user inputs or in these actions, I want my UI to change so and so. So basically, states is just a property bag. It's a set of properties you set to modify the look and feel of your element based on some user interaction. And these states are internally called by the control's logic. So when a control sees a mouse over, it actually calls internally mouse over state. The mouse over state will contain some property settings, which will basically change the look and feel of the control. So I'm just going to close this, come back. What I can do is I'm going to right-click the Edit Grid View, go to Edit Additional Templates, Container Style, edit a copy. Where did that go to? Sorry, that's fine. I'm going to go to states. If I go to states, and you can see a whole lot of states here, like normal. Normal is a base state. This is what the control is in its normal position when there's no user interaction whatsoever. But when you presses on it, you can see that there's a different, when it's disabled, you can do pointer over. And if you come down, you can see a whole lot of selection states. So you can see selected over here. So in selected, you can see the whole blue border with the check mark. I really don't want this to be shown in selected state. I want my selected state to just be black. So what I can do is open the document outline in Blend, and you can see these red record buttons. It shows that this element has been changed in this state. So I can further drill down. I can keep drilling down until I find which element actually changed. So I can go, you can see that, hey, this is the selected check mark. So probably in this state, I can set it to collapsed, and it's gone. So you don't really have to do multiple iterations of F5, change something, come back, see how it is. You can basically do those interactions here, change those values without having to do multiple round trips. Then I can go a bit more. I can select the selected border. You can see, hey, this has a stroke over here. I want to change that to, let's say, a different shade of black. And there's actually two borders, so I have to change in a couple of places. But content border, it's foreground. Yeah, change this guy as well. Give me a sec. Did that change? Yeah, it's black, so it's right. Oh, sorry, I thought it was actually blue still. So it's pretty easy to actually modify states and stuff in Blend itself. So have you guys ever written states and everything by hand? Or do you guys all do writing states by hand? You do hand coding, right? Pretty much all the time. So you can see it's much easier to actually use Blend in these situations. The last thing I'm going to show you is working with animations. So Blend has a full-fledged animation editor. You can create traditional applications using keyframe animations, color animations, etc. They also support actually altering theme animations. Theme animations is a part of the Windows 8 animation library. So if you open the control panel and stuff, the new settings app in Windows, you can see things fading in and fading out. You don't really have to write those animations yourself anymore by changing the opacity or visibility of the object. There are pre-canned animations like fade out animation, fade in animation that you can use to basically get those effects in your Windows 8 applications without having to hard code any of those. So there's this whole set. I think there's around 14 animations in whole. And Blend allows you to order those animations within the context of a state. We have full support for that. So I'll show you a quick demo of that. Let's say I really want to bring up, I'm going to have a text block. I'm going to add a text block to this page. I'm going to call it, I just want to give it a movie name. I really like the whole Zune idea of things moving in the background, a slightly moving background. So I'm going to simulate something similar using theme animations and standard animations. I'm going to call it, let's say, dark shadows or something. I'm going to right-click on it, again, edit style. I'm going to apply a new style to it, like the header text style. So it's pretty big. I'm just going to put it in a fancy angle. But I can use Blend's Adorner system to actually transform anything. So I can just click here. My mouse is not the best. OK, yeah. Oops. Yeah, my mouse not behaving. I'm just going to change the properties in the property inspector itself. OK, just put an angle. I'm going to select the text block, change its foreground property, some other color. So basically, if you select this particular button over here, it shows all the resources in your project. So you can really just select it from here as well. So I'm going to just select it to this color, which is not really visible. This is better. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to the states panel. I'm going to add a new state group. So these state groups over here, like full screen landscape, filled, portrait, snapped, etc., is to allow your application to respond to different states. So basically, you can actually, I can select the snap state and say that, hey, in snap state, I don't really want my title to be shown because there's so much space less, right? It's only 326 pixels. So I can select this and set the visibility to collapsed if I want to. And you can see, hey, in snap state, that particular that particular object is no longer there. But if I go back to filled or full screen, it comes back. So it's pretty easy to modify states and stuff in Blend itself. Now what I'm going to do is I've added a new state group. Then I'm going to add a new state to it. A state group is basically, you don't have to really name it or anything. It's just basically a collection of states. There's nothing special to it. So I'm just going to call it Visual State 1. I'm going to add one more state, which is Visual State 2. In Visual State 1, I would like this not to be there. And in Visual State 2, I want to make it come in with a Windows 8 animation. So I'm going to select Dark Shadows. I'm going to select this Visual State name over here. You can see a new property editor show up here. It's called Theme Animations. From this list, I can select, let's say, the Fade Out Theme Animation, which actually, the box comes on a different monitor, sorry. Yeah, I can select which element I want to apply to. I'm going to say I'm going to apply to the text block. I'm going to click OK, so you can see it disappears here. I'll go to Visual State 1. I'm going to add a fade-in animation to it. You can see it come back. So in my code behind, all I have to do is when my application loads up or something, I just have to say, hey, Visual State Manager, go to state and give the state name. And then Visual State Manager will actually force this page to go to that state, and you can see that thing come in with a proper Windows 8 animation. In Blend, you can even preview these animations by clicking this button over here. It's called Transition Preview. We generally turn this off because of perf reasons, because we will have to render everything at 30 frames a second. So if you click on it, and then I start toggle limiting the states, you can see the animation actually happening. It fades in slightly. In runtime, it looks much better. So that's how we can work with theme animations. There's a whole bunch of theme animations you can use. But primarily, what I've seen people use is the fade-in, the pop-out. Pretty much most of the other ones are very specific to certain scenarios. For example, if you look at the split close theme animation, the only place used in Windows is for the combo box to come up. So when you click on the combo box, you can see it like pop in and expand, right? So that is the animation that Windows uses to simulate that. So it's pretty rare to use some of these animations, but fade-in and pop-out are pretty common. So let's do let's do a keyframe animation now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group this guy. Let me just come back to base. Go back to assets panel. I'm going to select grid over here. Group into another grid. I want to have a really big image in the background that slowly moves where the application is running. It basically moves from X to Y and Y again to Y negative, and just moves around slowly throughout the lifetime application. It basically looks like zoomed, right? You have the whole artist thing moving around. So I just want to simulate something like that. So what I can do for that is add an image control. To this grid over here. Set the image controls source to one of my, oh, you can see that it's over there. I'm going to set it to reset layout all, so it fills the whole space, and it's in the background. But I want to move it, right? So if I move it, I really want it to be bigger than the actual image so that the user does not see anything, a different shade actually coming in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to scale. I'm going to make it 2.5 times bigger than usual. Oh, sorry. I did not. This is the one. So it actually is much bigger than the normal size. It's basically scaled up. I'm going to go here, add a new storyboard. So there's a new storyboard here. What I can do is, what I can say is that when the time is 4 seconds, I want the image to move from left to right by 100 pixels. So I can select 4 over here, select the image, go to the translate transform. So there's one thing in Windows that to be very careful about when you're writing animations. There are two kinds of animations, dependent animations and independent animations. Independent animations are those like if you modify transforms, like you can do a translate transform, you can make it rotate transforms. Those things are independent. Those happen with those happen on render thread and doesn't really block the UI thread from executing. But things like if you want to change the height and width of an element using an animation, that'll cause the UI thread to block because now we have to do the whole thing, measure and arrange and relay out the entire thing. So in low-powered ARM devices, blocking the UI thread is not good. You'll actually have, that's why when you insert an application, you'll see stutter while moving, is because they might be doing some animations and stuff that's actually blocking the UI thread. So in Windows, you'll be very careful because we have to support multiple form factors and way different kinds of tablets out there. Never use dependent animations. Always use independent animations. And you're safe with transforms, but modifying like margins and widths and heights, not a good idea. So that's why I'm doing, I could do the same thing by making it bigger. I could have done a width. I could just modify the width. I don't want to. I'm actually applying a transform at that point. So here I'm just going to set the translate to, I want to move it to X, like 100 pixels to the right.
So does the blend UI tell you what kind of animation?
Yes, if I tried modifying the width, the blend will show a dialog saying that, hey, you want to modify dependent animation? Click if you want to proceed. Some people know what they're doing, right? In certain situations, they might have to do, dependent animations. You have to take the risk. If you have a lot of elements, guaranteed it's going to cause performance issues in the application. So I just moved it 100 pixels to the right, and now I can just play that animation over here. You can see the image slowly moving to the right. And this is all independent. This happens without blocking the UI thread. So as long as it transforms, you're good. And I can just, I'm just going to go right. And let's say at 5 seconds, I wanted to move another 10 pixels down. I can play the animation again. You can see it's slowly actually moving. And then at that point, it actually moves down. It's pretty easy. You can modify any number of animation, create all kinds of these animations, modifying any of the independent properties, and it's that easy in Blend. You can then set the property of this. I want it to loop forever. So all I have to do is select the animation over here. And just set the repeat behavior to forever. And I'm good. It'll keep looping in as long as the application alive will explicitly call the storyboard to stop. So that's pretty much it for my demo section. And if you guys have any questions, please go ahead. And I can show you a lot more features if you want me to, or anything specific you're interested in, just let me know. Yeah?
I might have missed it. What version of Blend is this?
This is update to CDP2, which is just publicly released like last week on 31st. Yeah, but it's the same for Metro. It's the same for Windows Store. It is the same as RTM. There's no difference. We just added support for WPF and Silverlight in update to CDP2. And we added Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop support for Metro as well. So that's pretty much it from Blend. So we have I basically showed you like document outline, assets panel. I've showed you, design surface. I showed property inspector. There are a couple of things like device panel, which is pretty cool. You don't really have to leave. So it supports multiple resolutions, right? If you want to really test, you're allowed to change the monitor, resolution of application of your monitor or your physical machine, or find machines that support the resolution. But in Blend, you can just go ahead and click that, and we'll actually render the design surface at that resolution. So you don't really have to deploy to multiple devices to verify if your application scales well. You just have to use the device panel and select the resolution that you want to test in. We also allow you to preview how your application would look like if it's in like landscape mode or fill. All you have to do is click the snap view, fill view over here, and we resize the entire design surface to only fit in that area so you can see how your application works in fill view. You can click snap, so you can only have space enough for snap. You can do the same thing for portrait as well. So we provide a lot of functionality that a device would and what a user would feel in device within the device panel. And you can even change your theme. So as you know, if you want to write XAML applications, we support dark, light that the application author chooses. Or if the user chooses high contrast and we have to render things in high contrast, you can even preview those in Blend itself. You don't really have to go and change your property. You have to change your system properties to reflect and test it out. You can do all within Blend. Another one thing I haven't talked about, resource panel. Resource panel is pretty much our, it's something that helps people in refactoring and stuff. Like you pretty much can see all the resources in your application sorted by, grouped by the document it's coming from. You can do complex things like you can delete a resource. Deleting a resource means you might break your XAML because this resource might be used in multiple places. But here you can actually say, hey, convert a local value. It'll actually break all the references, make copies of the resource in the local place itself so that your XAML is always valid. We do all the refactoring heavy work for you. So that's what the resource panel is used for. You can also directly edit. Click on it, and we'll open the style directly, so you can edit in place as well. So that's pretty much it. That's like a rundown of the major Blend features that's available at this point. Any questions?
Actually, before we do some questions, everybody give Hari a round of applause. Thank you. My portion of the presentation is going to be quite short, relatively, because you've already seen all the features of Blend, and Hari's already showed off all the cool stuff that it can do. And for the most part, Blend is a single story for developing your Windows 8 apps, whether you're using XAML or HTML. But the nature of the different language stacks, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then XAML and C# means that there are going to be a lot of differences in the app still. So if you are a web stack developer, you're going to come to expect what you find in Blend for the web stack developers. And if you're a XAML C#, hopefully you'll also come to expect what you see in Blend for those developers. You'll see a lot of, in the C# XAML stack, you'll see a lot of strong typing, a lot of references all the way back down to exactly where a type was declared and everything. And you don't always get that in HTML and JavaScript. You know that when you're a web stack developer, you're kind of shooting from the hip. There's a lot of stuff that the IDEs just can't tell you because it's all dynamic, and there's no way for it to possibly know what type this variable might be or whatever. So you'll notice all of those differences between the two, but the way that they implemented Blend for HTML and JavaScript is really exciting in my opinion. First of all, it's all new. I haven't seen any IDE that does this. That we've had a lot of kind of code-based IDEs in the past, like your Notepad++ that just raw, just work with the code only. Of course, Visual Studio has had incredible web stack IDE support for a long time, very code-based support. Everybody tries to get into a WYSIWYG HTML support, and it seems like developers never really like it, and I'm one of them. I've never really liked any of the WYSIWYG support that I've found in any IDE, but Blend is actually the first time I've ever really liked a design-based IDE for the web stack, and I'll show you exactly why. So I've just opened any project. I'm opening my CodeShow project. The front page looks like a lot of Windows 8 in that it's just got a grid of tiles. In my case, they represent demos. I'll just go ahead and run the project here so you can see what CodeShow looks like when it's running. And then I'm going to jump over into Blend with this same project.
Remote machine.
I have it set for a remote machine, and it's not able to communicate with my Surface, which is currently at my house. Thank you for that. And by the way, I'm hitting Control F5 to make it faster. I always like to remind people of that. And I'm also getting this issue with the fact that it's already installed on this machine. I have the store version, because this is actually in the store. You can't see that. I have the store version installed on the machine, and so it's not letting me run the app. So all I have to do is go to my start screen. I know you can't see this. Go to my start screen and uninstall CodeShow real quick, and then I can go run my app and use the built version.
Another quick tip is you could just change your name on a conversion or on the app manifest. You can just give a different name. Like that.
But then if you have notifications and all, then that part.
Oh, yeah,
that won't work.
Yeah.
Oh, and it didn't like that. So let me go ahead and try to change the name using Hari's tip. Not that this is all that important. We're going to see the app running in Blend in just a second, but this will be nice to. So here you would put something on there?
It's very beautiful.
Oh, it's freaking out. Oh well. Well, we'll just go ahead and see it in Blend. That shouldn't be a problem. Hopefully this stops though. Okay. Whatever that was, I have no explanation for that. Okay, so here we are. We're working in Visual Studio because we are a developer. We're the code guy, okay? We like to look at functions and methods, and we love curly braces. So we're using Visual Studio for this. But then all of a sudden, we need to switch over to kind of design mode, or maybe we're handing off the project to a designer, right? Somebody who's going to be looking at the exact same project, but from the perspective of a designer. So I'm going to right-click on CodeShow and open in Blend. Now, I actually shouldn't have done that because I already had it open. There we go. So here it is in Blend, and you can see that one of the huge, it's flickering a little bit. One of the huge advantages of Blend is that it's already showing me my app. Boy, I wonder if that's going to stop.
Yeah, that's better.
It's good now?
Yeah.
Maybe I just shouldn't talk. Oh well. You guys can interpolate. So Blend is already showing me what it looks like. Now let me tell you enough about CodeShow so that you can tell what Blend is doing for me here. CodeShow doesn't have a little JavaScript array of demos that it loads up. It has instead a demos folder, and when my app starts, an asynchronous process begins that enumerates all of the demos folders in the project. And for each one, it builds some meta information about that demo, and it creates a tile for it, or it creates the list that the tiles are based on. So all of that JavaScript is actually running in Blend. So this is the first IDE that I've ever seen where you're actually designing at the same time that you're executing, and there's a lot of power in that. You guys saw it in the XAML side, and you'll see it in the HTML side too, which is perhaps even more impressive given the nature of HTML and JavaScript. But you know the engine, the JavaScript engine that's driving Internet Explorer 10? That engine is running right now. That's the same exact engine that's driving what you see in Blend. Now let me go ahead and click on some of these elements in here, and you can tell that I'm in design mode, right? When I click on that, I get little handles around it like I want to resize that. Well, that's design mode, but then I can flip up to interactive mode. Does the XAML side have the same type of switch?
No.
Doesn't have that switch. So I can switch it to interactive mode, and then you'll see that all my IDE Chrome goes away and my flicker enhances. It's not flickering over here. It looks just beautiful over here. But so all of my Chrome goes away, and I'm actually looking at my app now as if I was a user of the app. I'm browsing the app, okay? So now clicking on a tile doesn't give me design handles around it. Instead, it navigates to that demo in question. So what we were talking about is the fact that when you're in Blend, you're like in design mode, but then you just flip this switch and it takes you to interactive mode. And the real reason to do that is so that you can change your state. You can change the page that you're currently on, or if you're in a card game, you can flip a card over, something like that. You want to change your state like a user would, right? Well, you change that state, and then you flip back out of interactive mode and back into design mode. And the beautiful thing here is that you still maintain that state. So you're still on the page you navigated to. If you were playing a card game and you flipped a card over, it's still flipped over. If you know anything about JavaScript and HTML, you know the way that we interact with the HTML elements is by adding little classes to different elements. You know, you decorate it with the flipped attribute, with the flipped class. And then your CSS knows how to style that card and maybe show the image or do an animation or whatever. Well, all those classes are constantly changing their values, and all of those class values are maintained whenever you flip out of interactive mode and back into design mode, okay? So that's the nice thing. So now here I am in design mode on this page. Actually, what I meant to do was, while I was still in interactive mode, to swipe over here and look at this grid. Now, you know in XAML you've got a grid, right? Well, when we were releasing Windows 8 and giving people the ability to program for it in either XAML or HTML, we said, we're really going to need to have feature parity here. We're going to need to give people the same powerful grid implement that in HTML that we have in XAML. So Microsoft implemented the -ms-grid. That's currently our vendor proprietary prefixed version of the grid CSS attribute, which is a standard in W3C. It's just not really implemented by any of the other browsers yet. So we had to kind of jump ahead and make sure we got that thing implemented so that we could reach feature parity with XAML. So this grid, we have the same powerful grid in HTML that we do in XAML. And I'm actually using this grid in a way I probably wouldn't normally, to be a whole bunch of little tiny cells. So let's jump back out of interactive mode and see how it handles those cells. I can go click, and now notice when I click one time, it actually doesn't know what it is. There's a bunch of layered stuff here, so it doesn't know what it is that I wanted to click on, so it just highlighted the containing element there. But I can click again, and then it drills in a little bit more, and now it says, now I know what you're actually wanting to click on, that individual cell. So I click in on that individual cell, and you can see that I've got all the Chrome that allows me to control that grid, modify the sizes, and all of that. So really good UI for switching between design mode and interactive mode. Now, if I go back to interactive mode and get myself back to my hub page, and then I flip out of interactive mode, you saw in the XAML how you got access to all of the styles and the style inheritance, so you can drill into any element and figure out why, for instance, the selected item had a check mark up in the top right corner, right? Well, in HTML and JavaScript and CSS, we have cascading style sheets, CSS. And so you have multiple style sheets, all these layered style sheets, and a style, for instance, the addition of a little check mark or a blue outline or something like that, could come from anywhere in this CSS inheritance. There might be, at any given point, 6 or 10 or 20 different style sheets, hopefully it's not that many, different style sheets that are responsible for the styling of any given thing. Now it's really cool the way this is implemented, because any element that I click on, so let me click on this animations tile here, and I click a few times until it knows that this is what I want to drill into. So this tile, how does it get its width? If we look over at the right, it tells us that its width property is 250 pixels, but where does that come from? You see on the top it says winning properties. That means that it applied all of those cascading style sheets and determined that 250 pixels was the winning value. In other words, maybe the width of that tile was specified down deep in the WinJS CSS file for us, but then maybe we overwrote it in our default.css. And then maybe for this specific page, we overwrote it again and said, I want you to be 250 pixels. Who knows what that cascading inheritance was, but when you have winning properties selected here, it actually tells you just the winning one. And the cool thing is that it knows where that came from. So if I go and change 250 pixels to, say, 240 pixels, it knows which CSS file to change that in. Now, if it is able to change it for us, then ducky, but sometimes it's not. Let's look down at some of these properties are grayed out. That means that it got that property, but it's in a CSS file that's read-only. Usually that means it's in the Win.js. There are two CSS files in the Win.js library, UI Light and UI Dark. In this case, I'm using UI Light. And so actually, if I hover over those, I already am, you cannot edit this property because it's declared in uilight.css. So it's not going to let me change that one. Okay? Sometimes I actually, and again, I'm going to drill back into the CSS grid in interactive mode, and then flip, and then I'm going to scroll all the way to the right, flip back out of interactive mode, and I'm going to click on one of these little grid items again. Now the properties on the right, takes a little while for them to refresh. The properties on the right have a little blue outline around them. What do you suppose that one means? Any guesses? They're also gray, that's a hint. I can't change them. Why not? They're coming from JavaScript. They're dynamically created. It's created at runtime. These properties can't be changed because basically you did it with code. So this whole grid, I didn't do that declaratively. That would have taken me a week. I actually ran through a couple loops and got some random color numbers and created that grid. And because I did that in JavaScript, it's saying it's ridiculous for you to think that you could come in here and change this color to something else, because what do I change for you? There's not a CSS file that did this. This was done using JavaScript. So it's really super smart about where all these styles came from and what it needs to go change to do this. The thing that I think is really cool is that for the developer, because XAML and C# we've done so much work to give them quite a bit of feature parity, and because Blend actually really ties those together really well. Now you have a bit of a consistent development story where you understand Blend and where the properties are and where to go do things, and it kind of means that you can take your XAML C# skills and translate those right over to the HTML JavaScript world. Somewhat. There's still the nature of the beast in here, and you still need to kind of get used to it. But okay, so the other cool thing that I want to point out about Blend using HTML and JavaScript is that you've got the live DOM running over here. So all of those, however many billions of pixels I have rendered there in that grid, all of those are a little tiny div, and every single one of those is available to me in my live DOM, because they actually exist. So even though these aren't declared in HTML, I still see them in my live DOM. So I could come over here and I could click on one of these, and I'm actually grabbing that individual div element. Now these ones I can't change because of course they were created dynamically, but if I wanted to, I could right click on one of these, and if I had access to it, actually let me just click on something I do have access to, like that, and I could add a new class. See, this is an H2, and so I could right click on that and I could add a new class to that element, and then I could start filling out that class, and it gives me, you know, quite a bit of code support down here, in that the whole time I'm designing I also have access to my HTML and my CSS. I can't actually change my CSS pane here to a JavaScript, but you don't usually want to write your JavaScript in Blend. It doesn't give you nearly as good a support. Okay, so let me invite Hari back up, and we're going to go ahead and transition from presentation to Q&A, and you guys can just fire whatever questions you have at us, and I might be able to answer, say, 15% of them.
I know nothing about HTML.
Well, and ask XAML C# questions as well. Do you want to keep your microphone on for Q&A? I think we probably need those.
So what kind of animation support we have on the Blend for JavaScript? Like say the storyboard, a bunch of those things are available for JavaScript?
So the question was, what sort of animation support do we have in the HTML JavaScript world? The animation support is, I would say, not as rich as XAML, but it is rich and getting richer, and it's all due to CSS animations. So if you look in CSS animations, actually if you go to IE Test Drive, Microsoft has that site that has a lot of really good demonstrations of the capabilities of the IE engine, which is what's being used behind all this. You can see a lot of those animations. So we have transitions where we can basically just say, anytime the user changes, or the code changes a property of an element, I want you to animate the transition from what the value was to what the value is. So that if I change, for instance, the width from 100 pixels to 200 pixels, then it goes whoosh, and it gradually gets bigger. So that's a transition. Now in animation, you define an animation, just like you do in XAML, you define a storyboard with animations in it. You define an animation and you can animate all the different properties, the CSS properties, and you can create as many keyframes as you want, and then you apply that animation to any given element and to any given class. And then as soon as an element acquires that class, whether it's because the page just started up and it had it, or because the user did some action and JavaScript went and added that class, as soon as it acquires that class, that animation runs.
Jeremy, I've never seen this before. Can you show this, like how do we do animations in here, even as simple as take a red box and convert it to blue or 1 second?
I think that I would have to kind of think about some of the terms and stuff, so I think I'd be too much thinking in front of you.
Even like animation editor like XAML here? Like at least there you have
to do it through Blend?
Yeah.
I actually haven't done the animations in Blend before with HTML. I always do mine by hand, so.
We can talk about it offline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be glad to try to do it
just not,
afterwards.
I can talk about it, like just ping me offline or after this meeting, just we can talk about it. But, yeah.
So I had a question about states. When we were doing the XAML stuff, I saw, like from the little window, there were 2 different kinds of states. One was application states, and then one was visual states.
Yes.
Are those the only 2 buckets, and what exactly?
You can create n number of buckets. So visual state group is just basically a collection of states. You can have n number of visual state groups in an application. So basically one was for application view states. The reason it's named that way is because a layout aware page, when the window size changes, right, when it goes from to snapped or filled, it actually calls into that particular state and makes, and that state will then have those properties set on the UI elements, which will it'll change it to something the user expects at that state. But you can create n number of state groups. You can create something like I did, right? I created some for animation. I wanted to kick off a particular animation in this state, so I can do that as well.
And so is one visual state associated with only one application state, or can one visual state be associated with many application states? And
so application states are nothing special. It is just normal visual states.
Okay.
The reason we have chosen to implement the way the UI changes and different window sizes using states. It's a method to achieve the same thing, but there's nothing. It's just a way. It's an implementation detail. It's not tied to it in any way.
Yes.
In I think the first meeting or maybe some other one, we looked at the cooking app, and in the grid there there are multiple cooking different recipes, and every other one had a different color background. And I was wondering, how do you achieve that with XAML?
That's actually doable. So what you do
let's
is
repeat the question. Repeat the question.
So the question is, so each recipe had a different background, right? So how do you achieve that in XAML? So there are 2 ways to do it. What you can do is you can have a property in a data model that specifies what color you want, and you can bind that property to the background property, right? Another way to do it, you can have different data templates. You can define different data templates, each of a different color, and then what you can do is you basically override a class called the data template selector, and in that class there's a method that allows you to select a particular template. So basically you can check, hey, this recipe belongs to this class, so let's load this template instead of another one. So you can do that. So basically you would write some code for it to happen, or you can just do a data binding, either way.
And basically the same 2 options exist in HTML and JavaScript. If you have some reason why one is red and the other one is blue, then I would attribute that to the data and dynamically choose a class, or in your case, choose a color based on that data. But you also have full control of selecting which template you want.
How about, does Blend have support for semantic zoom?
Oh, yes. So
Repeat the question.
so the question is, does Blend have support for semantic zoom? So our support at this point is, look, a semantic zoom has both zoomed out view and zoomed in view, right? So if you select a grid view inside a zoomed out view, we'll render that. If you select the grid inside the a zoomed-in view, we'll render that. So you can basically toggle between these, and you can see that render in the designer. So we support that. But nothing more than that is basically for visualization. Yeah.
I've done that in HTML, and you switch to your interactive mode, and do your little pinch gesture, and then you switch back out, and you've just switched.
What's a good, so I was trying to get up to speed with XAML, and I searched on Bing, like, okay, what are good places to learn XAML, what are good books? And I saw a lot of blogs and books that were referring to Silverlight and how to use XAML for Silverlight, and I did not know if that's something I wanted to get into, or it was just confusing because we've gone through so many layers and iterations. I did not know where to start. Do you have a good recommendation on where to start to learn XAML constructs and concepts?
Okay. So the Expression team has a blog called Blend Insider, blendinsider.com. We have a lot of
Insider?
Yeah, okay. blendinsider.com. It has a lot of good content, especially for Windows Store. Honestly, what we call Jupyter, or the XAML platform, right, is very close to Silverlight. The platform is derived from Silverlight version of XAML. So a lot of the constructs that you see in Silverlight will also be there in Jupyter, or the Windows Store XAML platform, but not everything. So you'll have, there's a lot of things missing. Like, for example, implicit data templates is not available in Jupyter. There are a lot of things that's missing, but it's basically derived from Silverlight itself. So you'll have some parity.
And what I found when I was trying to learn some XAML was that if I started with anything Silverlight, it assumed that I already knew some of the basic concepts of XAML. And so if I started with a WPF course, then even though so many things that are in WPF don't exist in Silverlight or Windows Store apps, what are you calling it?
XAML, let's call it XAML platform.
Okay.
XAML platform for Windows Store apps. Yeah.
If you start with a WPF course, then they usually go, okay, you don't know anything about XAML, so let's start with what is a resource. Okay. Then it helps me learn the concept. But just know that you'll probably learn some things in WPF, and then you'll come over and find out that that doesn't even exist in Silverlight or Windows 8. And yeah.
Have you seen the Charles Petzel book?
Yeah.
No, I have not. I always thought that was
He starts at what are brackets? What goes inside of a bracket?
Okay.
How do you build up a bracket? What's an attribute? What's not an attribute? He starts from baby steps.
But he assumes you know what a bracket is, right?
Yeah, once you get to 3/4 through the book, then he gets into WPF specifics and you can ignore it. But that first, 2/3 of the book is really, really good.
And what's the title of this one?
I think it's just
Programming Windows?
He has a book for each platform, so
I think
just
it's
search
programming
it, yeah.
XAML or programming Silverlight.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Petzel book is fantastic.
Okay.
And my favorite is the ProBlend book. That is, I think, about 300 pages, and out of which you'll read really 200 pages. And that goes over, it talks about nothing about code, it's only about Blend, everything that you can do just with Blend.
Great.
It goes over as if it's like a Photoshop book. This button does this button does this. And that's,
ProBlend?
Yeah, that's the first time I actually understood what Blend could do.
Do you know the author?
I'm trying to search, I think...
Also, Adam Kinney's blog is pretty good for Blend. Adam Kinney?
Adam Kinley?
Kinney.
Kinney, okay.
Yeah.
Kinney.
Yeah.
Is he one of the authors for an upcoming Windows Phone book?
He's done a lot. He currently works with Robert Ingebretson on a company. He's pretty famous in the XAML circle. His blog was pretty good back in the day.
And now he's doing more JavaScript.
JavaScript, I know.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say that.
He came over to the. He left the dark side.
Yeah, he
came to the dark
he's
side.
gone to the dark side.
Oh.
Yeah.
We are the dark side.
Questions? I think you.
Yeah, so are there any best practices in terms of jumping between Blend and Visual Studio? Like you said, Visual Studio is probably we're going to be doing a lot of your debugging of JavaScript or C#. Any kind of workflow tips and tricks about jumping back and forth?
Actually, Blend and Visual Studio supports the same project solution structure, so everything is compatible. If you create a Visual Studio project, that'll open in Blend. If you create a Blend project, it'll open in VS as well. And there's no specific practices, and we monitor for file changes and everything on both products. So if you make a change here, it'll be reflected in Blend when you go back. So there's nothing specific. It should just work for you. Other than that, I wouldn't say any specific practices, but one thing I'll tell you is, especially if you're using C#, the the nature, for example, because we run a lot of user code, it is sometimes necessary for you to guard your code so it doesn't crash the designer. Because in your user code, you might expect a certain type not to be null. But in the context of designer, because we don't have access to, let's say, every web service or anything out there, things might cause the designer to go down. So you might need to be a little careful in guarding certain things, especially in your constructors and stuff. So be a bit careful there. Other than that, Blend should just work.
So really, an individual like myself can jump back and forth and use Blend for its strengths and Visual Studio for its strengths. But you can also certainly use it if you have a team of 4, 3 developers and a designer, everybody's speaking the same language. They're working on the same source control. It's just that one guy's using the design tool and the other guys are using Visual Studio.
And Blend has TFS as well, integration as well. So
you've disconnected your laptop, so I don't know how convenient it will be, but when you talk about Adobe and Blend integration, what kind of features are we talking about?
Can I use yours?
Yeah, sure.
It's available in HTML as well. So if I go to File, I go to Import. I can do Import Adobe Photoshop file, so I can import a PSD.
Okay.
So if I have a PSD, if I import it, it actually show you every layer. You can selectively select, hey, I want this layer, that layer, and import as images back to the application. In Illustrator, we'll convert the vector drawing into XAML version of it, the path vector, and you can just use that as well.
Okay.
So it's pretty simple. It's just a one dialog, it's a function.
Okay, and I'm guessing when you finally publish the app, it does the conversion into proper formats for you.
Well, like he said, when you import it, it turns it into XAML at that time.
For Illustrator, for PSD, it'll just let you import specific layers as images.
I see.
So all that is taken care of for you.
Does it put it in an actual, wrap it in an actual image?
No, it'll just import your project at that point.
Oh.
Because you don't want to know if you don't create how many image blocks, right?
I see.
But it'll import the things to your project though.
I see. We got time for more questions. Feel free.
So, again, about the PSD file. So it converts the PSD file. It won't be like I can keep editing the PSD file in Photoshop and it'll keep updating in Blend.
Oh, no.
Okay,
No.
that would be sweet.
Yeah, I know. But the problem is once you commit a PSD, there's no actual translation back because we're actually extracting specific layers out of it.
Okay, yeah, it might change in a way that you can.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting point. If anybody's looking to learn more CSS, I just submitted the last change to my new book yesterday, and so you can already buy it early, but it's going to be printed here in a couple weeks, and you can find it at aka.ms/CSS book. So it's all about CSS, but it's kind of specific to Windows 8. Yeah, it feels good to be done. I always say if anybody needs any encouragement or about not writing a book your first year at Microsoft and your first year being a dad, you can ask either my wife or myself. Okay, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up. We can feel free to have some more discussion after we turn off the recorders, so feel free to stick around, but this ends the public Q&A piece.